get it. So,
and we're going live here in a few seconds, guys.
All right, I see it. Yeah, Amanda has people in town, and Libby is out of town. Will join late. Andrew is unable to attend, so I think it's probably us, and when Will gets here, unfortunately. It's a nice evening. I get it. I just conducted a public meeting for something else, and people are probably done with video stuff. I do have a question though, BJ. Are we going to be contemplating in-person meetings at some point in the near future, just out of curiosity?
Oh, buddy, old pal.
Old buddy, old pal. I see Jim with his mask on at the farmer's market. That's all.
Yeah. Oh, were you there on Saturday?
I was, but we were torching through there trying to get the Suns basketball tournament.
Swamped. It was wonderful.
Good. It's
wonderful. Good. Yeah.
Well, I think we'll probably bring that up at the June meeting, see how people feel about it. We've been set up with a wonderful tech package.
Yeah.
That we can use, a screen, a projection screen, a projector. The CAC now has its own laptop, so maybe we can have it at a shelter house or something like that. So kind of ease our way back into in-person meetings.
Yeah, and I expect it'll be a transition. That's sort of how it is everywhere we're working right now as well. Some places are just opening up, and you've got to get things on the calendar, and so it's going to take, even once you say yes, we're doing it, it may take 6 to 8 weeks to actually achieve it. So totally understand. So we do have some data I want to share from the mobility study. That's sort of the primary thing, and we'll probably have. I'll send this out around to the whole group. I think there's. You look at it, you know how this goes, Jim, and it raises more questions.
Yeah,
so you kind of want to. It makes you want to make a couple other maps and a couple other, label a couple other things and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'll leave it to you, BJ, if you think you want me to go ahead and bring this up in June or not. Is that the 3rd?
Yes.
Is that right? That's my birthday. We'll see how that goes. Anyhow.
Well, it's my anniversary. And you can
okay. All right. I'll make it. We'll make it work. We'll make it work.
You think 2 years with that woman is easy?
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and share screen. This is. I just need your permission to do that, BJ, to share the screen.
Let's see.
And I actually will pull up while I'm waiting on that.
Oh, sorry.
You're all right.
I goofed.
Yeah. You're all right. Let me also.
Oh, I'm not all right. I totally goofed.
Well, it's okay. I'm still grabbing a file here, so that's no problem.
See. Participants. There we go.
I am. I'm going to pull up the. Okay. So this is what I'm going to share is all incredibly raw. So this is like hot off the presses stuff here. So let me share it. And so there's, I think, another sort of level of analysis to do here. And I think first and foremost, I would sort of want to remind us that, there were 17 things we asked people about. I'll go through all 17 of them. But there was a top 9, once you got past this 9, the sort of level of importance drops off. So I'll show you all 17, but there's 8 of these that aren't as important as the top 9. So it's good to know where people were saying it's an issue, but there just wasn't the number of people talking about it was fewer and fewer as you go down the list. And so what I'm showing you right now is not in any rank order. So it's labeled 1 through 17, but that's just the order of some of the questions were answered. And so we haven't ordered it in terms of, this top 9 list. So that's why I just wanted to just sort of bring that up off the top, that what we'll look at is raw. So, the sidewalks were tops, parks was tops, multi-use paths, crosswalks, slow calm traffic, aesthetic appearance of streetscapes, street trees and school zones. Those were the top. So we could probably put a little star on those, and I think maybe I'll just drag this over to another screen so that we can do that live as we go through here. a little live markup. But want to give kudos to our spring intern, who's a Denison student who's no longer with us because she's graduated. So she's with the world, just not working for us as an intern. But she went through and put a geolocation on all 781 survey respondents. And so that's what this is a map of. And you'll see, I think this probably starts to, I wouldn't say skew the data, but influence the data pretty strongly, right? In terms of this is where the density of responses were. Wow. So red is dense and blue is less dense. So you can see that's sort of Oakland Park, Dunedin corridor, probably. Is that Northmore? Is that right? That kind of zone of the world, right? Mm-hmm. Good amount of answers, and really up and down, east and west of High Street there, all the way to Indianola. So pretty interesting to see. That's sort of a hot spot. You see a little bit here on Morse, around Henderson, probably sort of Beachwald, a good amount of responses. And then this sort of lighter yellow, you can start to see north of Morris, there's some of that lighter yellow, a little more of that lighter yellow, and sort of south of North Broadway, where there's a fairly high concentration. Not surprising when you've got the ravine through here, right? Lack of addresses or fewer houses in any case. And
well, I did try, Andrew.
I know. So there is definitely, I think, a general consistency, but definitely some hot spots in terms of who took the survey, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And you'll see that there are variations in this that are very understandable because of the question or the topic. And then there's some things that I think really come back to who answered the question and where they were. And it doesn't mean you throw it out, but it just is something to take into account as we think about this.
It gives a frame of reference.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure does. Yep.
Yeah. And we'll get density spelled right, don't worry. I think this is the sort of repair, replace curbs. I mean, this is almost like such a wide coverage that it's, and again, this is not on the highest of the list. This isn't in that sort of top 9 category. But, not terribly surprising maybe to see that sort of around High Street and some of the Indianola corridor down here, especially. I know in the walking tour that we took with the project team on Indianola the other day, there's a lot of missing stuff and damaged sidewalks here. So, this one, again, wasn't on that top 9 list, but it's interesting to see where some of those hot spots exist. Add or connect sidewalks. We have to go back, and I think this one makes me, Jim, want to turn on the sidewalk layer to see where the sidewalks are lacking, right?
Yeah.
Do you have that?
I'm almost positive we've got a GIS layer that has that. Yeah. So that's one of the things where I hesitate to bring this in June, because I think there are some layers of that I think would be good to add. And I think right now this is some data that sort of makes you say, well, what about this or what about that? And it'll take a few minutes to do that. But that's one, and I'm just going to go ahead and mark some stuff up because this is really the first time that I'm really walking through this. So if you have any thoughts or questions, I'll go ahead and jot these in. So I'm just going to put on this overlay. So we'll be able to see where there are sidewalks, where there aren't sidewalks. But I mean, I do know that through here, right, you've got a lot of streets in here that don't have sidewalks, right?
Correct. Yep.
And places where there's not a lot. I mean, there's even streets down here south of North Broadway, the side streets don't have sidewalks. So that could be what they're referring to. Most of this area does have sidewalks, although
most
of Indianola does not. So
right. Most of that hot zone north of North Broadway, east of High Street does actually have sidewalks.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of like trying to understand what that might be. But this was number 2 on that list of on that list of 9. This was the second highest priority. Add or improve safety of crosswalks. I think this is this one was also, let's see, this is number 5 on the list. You know, I think this again probably colored a little bit by where that density of responses was, but I think this is also where we have a lot of sort of activity, commercial activity, some of it pedestrian unfriendly. And so I'm not surprised to see that. I think there's also some bubbles coming here on that part of Indianola, both north and south of North Broadway. That getting, you know, I know there's crossing it. There's, you know, there's huge gaps between where there's lights on Indianola. So not terribly surprised to sort of see that. And again, I think, you know, putting a layer on here of where there are signalized crosswalks would be interesting. To try and match that up with reality on the ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
We might also be able to add in a layer here of land use, where we could see where there's concentrations of commercial activity, where, you know, you're clearly people are sort of gathering and maybe want to be able to cross High Street in a more safe way. So that might be another thing that would be interesting to look at here. I pinpoint a few things. And then I think you're starting to get a little bit up here north of Morris Road as well. There's sort of some yellow creeping in some of these other locations.
I was just going to mention that, and I wonder if like the sensitivity of the heat map might identify that, because that is kind of that District 9 area too. I would have guessed that to be identified with this request.
Yeah, and I think the other way to look at this is not all answers are the right answer, right? Anyone that says we need this, I don't care if it's, you know, if someone said it and we're seeing some yellow here, that means there's an issue that
sure,
you know, somebody has. So those could pop out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I would be really interested in seeing if we could drill down in some of those areas, because where I've noticed problems with crosswalks is like north of Morse Road, when people get off of the Coda bus stop right there in front of El Dorado, and then they cross the street there without walking north to the Graceland light and without walking south to the Morse light. They just cross right there, and they're crossing over 6 lanes of traffic, because there's 2 turn lanes on the Morse. There's 2 southbound lanes and 2 northbound lanes, and they cross there, and it's death defying. And I wonder if maybe we could scratch down beneath some of this and find out exactly where people feel we need the crosswalks, maybe kind of use that to cross-generate the location of the Coda bus stops. Because maybe it's not so much an addition of a crosswalk as it is a relocation of a Coda bus stop.
Yeah, I think we if people gave us their direct address, we have that. Otherwise we have cross streets. So the data, I'd say probably 2/3 of the data is probably cross streets instead of, because if people didn't want to give their address, we didn't want to make them do it.
Yeah.
Right? So, but what we can do, to your point, is add a layer that shows signalized intersections where people can safely cross. We might even be able to add a layer that shows where there's enhanced crosswalks, whether that's the ladder striping or the brick crosswalks. We can certainly add a layer to this map that would show the bus stops. So we might be able to see some of these crossing needs that people are identified pop up around those Coda stops. And if they aren't showing up there, we know people are crossing the street, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you see it all the time there. You see it all the time on Indianola, just south of Morse, because there's a route there's no place to safely cross there either. So I think adding that detail to these would be
You know, too,
super helpful.
if you think of that intersection, Morse and High, north of Morse, there isn't a density of residents that would have responded. It's commercial and TJ's and El Dorado and Bob's Bar. You know, it's so it probably wouldn't show up here as an issue, right, Andrew?
Right. Yeah. So I think that density of commercial activity would also be helpful. You know, and the survey is one tool, right? It tells us something, but we all know there's lived experience too. So that's important. So the other next one then is repair and level sidewalks. This was actually the top answer. And this is where I have like, this is one of those ones that gives me a little more, I wouldn't say confidence in the data, but just that we see a lot of different yellow areas here, right? Starts to tell us that there's, you know, of course, we're seeing a hot spot around where the priority or where the most respondents were. We're seeing a lot of stuff in a lot of different places in the neighborhood. So this gives me a little more confidence that people really thought about their answers and were very thoughtful in giving them. So this was number one.
So I'm kind of looking at the yellow spot in District 9. And so the first line above the gray area, that first road is Canala, that's my street. And we don't have sidewalks. The next road over is Charleston, and they don't even have curbs. So there's no curbs or sidewalks there. Sidewalks begin on the 3rd Street. Right where that yellow spot is. So obviously, it's not obvious, but if I'm a resident on Canala, that's not as good of a concern as other things.
Yeah, so BJ, you raised an interesting point because people may not have correctly interpreted the answer. So we had repair and level sidewalks where we're talking about existing sidewalks that might need to be repaired because of tripping hazards or what have you, condition of them. And the other one is add or connect sidewalks. And I'm wondering, since that's number 1 and number 2, what would be the harm in combining the answers to 1 and 2 and seeing that map? Because people may have they may have sort of said, well, I don't care, sidewalks, I want sidewalks, you know, regardless of the answer. To your point about people saying, I want them repaired, well, they aren't there, right? So that tells you that someone, you know, maybe just answered, I like sidewalks. So we could combine those answers. And that's something I can ask Zach about. And maybe that would tell us a little bit more of a complete story. Because I don't think we're going to get fine-grained enough down to like, there's a missing panel on a sidewalk in this location. We need to go fix it right now. It's not like we have a 311 request with someone's home address. We're not going to be able to do that with this information. Okay. But this one's a little bit more widespread. And again, this one doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think I'd like to keep them separate, because I do know that some of these places, especially along Indianola, this has been a key piece. I see it and people talk about it. So this is alleys and service roads. This was not in the top 9. But again, this one's fairly widespread as well in terms of seeing some yellow pop up.
Yeah, that's interesting because the hottest zone there doesn't have alleys or service roads. That's essentially Whetstone Library, right, on High Street? What that appears to be.
Whetstone's sort of right in here. I would have expected a huge respondent from, I would have expected between North Broadway and Weber.
Correct. I would have too, for this one.
Yeah.
And there are some yellow zones. You can see they're yellow in that area, BJ.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I would have.
I mean, there
suspected-
are some alleys behind this sort of businesses that are on High Street south of Hollenbeck.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
There
Like
are.
there is that alley behind North Star. There's the alley behind the Starbucks. There's the, yeah, there, I mean, there are.
There are alleys through here.
Mm,
I don't know, my personal opinion, at my house, they've, while it's chip and seal, which, takes, some beating, but they've done it probably twice in the last 15 years. They've chipped and sealed it, and it's fine. There's no holes. It's not like I'm, driving through it. Whereas I know my dentist's office is up here. There's giant holes. I mean,
yeah.
as big as a car in the alley. They're huge. They are car swallowing holes. So
Yeah. Huh.
there might be some the other thing that might be interesting here is do a little on the ground and try and go to some of these places and see if we can get some pictures of maybe there's some things that are emblematic of what people have written down
True.
here.
I'm gonna step away for just a moment, guys.
No problem.
Okay.
Awesome.
Let's see. Slow and calm traffic was number 6. Actually, I should probably go through here and highlight the ones that were on the tops. That was 2. This is number 5, so this is the top one. Ground level sidewalks were the top one. That one was not, and this was the top one. It's number 6. Yeah, there's just a bunch of little yellow things here, right? I mean, there's
Yeah. Right.
This could be cut through traffic potentially before that North Broadway light. I could sort of understand that maybe.
Yeah. So that's north of the UDF.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
On Indianola.
Very well could be.
Yeah.
Interesting that you sort of see this pocket down through the ravine too, right? I mean, it's interesting in this area here, like these streets, a lot of them don't connect. But yeah, interesting to see that.
Yeah.
And I'm also interested in how deep into the neighborhood it goes over here. I mean, in this case, like maybe it's responding to Milton. It's probably responding to Milton.
So where does Milton? There's Milton.
Milton is this right here.
Yeah. Right.
That's Milton.
Mm-hmm.
So I would bet that it's probably responding to Milton more than anything else, which is why I would go into the neighborhood over here. Because otherwise, if someone's speeding down this street, they're your neighbor, right?
Yeah.
You go have a little conversation.
It's true.
But I bet you that's probably responding to Milton, in all honesty. Which doesn't have sidewalks, right? And it connects to Park of Roses, and probably people take that,
Yeah.
between North Broadway and Whetstone. So that sort of makes some sense. On-street parking. This one was not on the top 9 list. But again, it could be related to just there's a lot of concentration of retail businesses here that probably have some spillover effect into the neighborhood a little bit. And you start to see a little bit of that down here as well.
Yeah, that makes a little more sense to me, actually, south of Broadway.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, these folks here, man, those are your neighbors. I don't know who would be parking, unless that's maybe school. It could be school related, perhaps, right? But that's pretty far away. It's pretty far away for IC. That's a number of blocks away. So that's sort of an interesting hotspot.
I guess I never perceived that to be a parking issue, but this obviously says
There's a huge
something
parking.
different. Something. Yeah.
And again, we didn't ask them to say, where's the on-street parking problem, right? It could be that they get to High Street and they want to be able to park on the street and they can't do it. Yeah.
That's true.
Right. Who
They
knows?
may be just identifying an issue somewhere.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the other thing we can do is now that we have these maps, we can tie back to specific comments. Because we did ask people, if you have a specific issue, let us know what it is. So we can also tie that back.
Good.
In the open-ended. So that's another thing we can do here is add some comments to maybe add some clarity to this. Improve street lighting. I don't know that we have a street light layer that shows where the street lights are. Might be able to sort of give this to the city and make it help with this. This also didn't make a top 9 list. But I do know there's a lack of, South and North Broadway doesn't have the pedestrian scale streetlights. So that's not terribly surprising. I think in here there are.
We do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think this chunk of the neighborhood does have that. And I don't know, this may speak to just how people feel walking around here at night, potentially.
Right.
So it's sort of interesting to see that. Access to multi-use paths along Tangy Trail. I think a hotspot that's probably given by the number of people that took the survey in this potential location, but also these folks are, on this side of the road, certainly close to the trail. But you start to, yeah,
they're in it.
Yeah. So, a fair amount down here and some other pockets of yellow. This was number 4 on the list. And it may be that some of this stuff tells us something very interesting, and it may also be that some of this tells us that, there's just raw numbers that we probably could add to this as well, which is how many people said something about multi-use paths, right? Mm-hmm. Just raw numbers. Right. So we could add those raw numbers. And again, this is a Zach question, because some of these might not be as impactful as a locational map. It might be just as impactful sharing those raw numbers.
Yeah, I mean that really is a Zach question, because this could, what I keep seeing is obviously these same hot zones, and it could be that this is where the respondents are, and yes, they are concerned about this particular issue, not necessarily within their specific
area.
Address.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
It is, and that's where it's like the utility of it. And again, we had to do this in order to figure it out. So you're seeing stuff, like I said, in real time.
Sure.
I literally got these today at like 3:30. So, improve existing bike lanes, bike infrastructure. This did not make it to that top 9 list either. I do think it's interesting. You start to see some nodes here along Indianola, which is where there isn't anything right now. Seeing some stuff on High Street themselves isn't terribly unsurprising. And again, I think if we overlaid this with the bike network that exists, it might be sort of interesting. And again, Zach may have some other thoughts now that we've done this.
Sure.
Improve existing parks. Again, I think we've got sort of that concentration, and again, a smattering of other responses that probably start to correspond with where people were. Improving existing parks was number 3 on the list. And there may be some more things we can do with this right now that we've done it. So I'll ask Zach about that. Neighborhood signage was not on the top 9 list. Again, it's sort of interesting to see some larger. That being said, it's some widespread yellow
Yeah.
on this one, which is sort of interesting. Bus stops, parking rides, transit access. Again, I think we could overlay the bike. I'm sorry, the stops, just to see if there's any gaps inside any of those red areas. But red or yellow, so it might be interesting to overlay that. And that didn't make the top. Didn't make the top list. Top 9. Additional street trees. This was number 8 on the list. There is some tree canopy data that we might be able to overlay on this as well. I know the city just updated that. I don't know if we could get a hold of that or not.
Okay.
That might be interesting. That being said, I do know that having looked at it, at least visually, Clintonville does pretty well on the tree canopy. It's probably one of the neighborhoods that has the highest. And I know the goal of the city is to get higher. And you got to take care of the canopy you have. So it's I think, important to advocate for it. But there are certainly parts of the city that are hot spots, without a doubt.
I see an opportunity here. It kind of says, it's an opportunity to educate and inform. Why does the city have a protocol for planting street trees? Why do they have this? Is it beautification? No, it's not. It's traffic calming, safety and security, lower greenhouse effect, help mitigate air pollution. That's why we have street trees. And I think that, I think that there's an opportunity here to maybe cross over and say some of these other concerns. This tells me that people are unwitting to the street tree planting process and why the city has it. And it tells me there's an opportunity to educate and inform that street trees are being planted to calm traffic, clean air, reduce pollution, blah, 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 all those reasons. Planting street trees does beautify a street, I think, but it has other side effects. And I think there's an opportunity there to say all these people have these concerns about street lighting, safety maybe could be the underlying factor there. And to me, it just seems like maybe those who expressed a concern about traffic calming and wanting traffic calming measures or something like that. I mean, we might be able to maybe do a little bit more education and information about street trees.
Yeah. Hey, BJ, Will is waiting to be let into the meeting.
Oh,
I think he just tried. He was picking up his daughter, so.
I fell asleep at the wheel. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. Hey, Will, how are you? In the control center, I see.
Oh, hi all. Sorry,
It's all right.
Hey, Will.
I got home. Like, meeting starts when I'm at dance class with my daughter, and then by the time I walk home, then I see the trash needs to be taken out and other stuff, and then suddenly it's. Sorry, I'm late.
It's all
That's
good.
every day, Will.
So we're just going through kind of Will in real time, and I'll send an email out after this, and we can sort of do a quick review, I think, of the more interesting ones, of the locational data of the responses, where we see people, bringing up certain issues. So well, I'll go back to the beginning here. We're almost through most of them, but we can also see sort of a heat map of where the responses came from in the neighborhood. I think that is sort of skewing or influencing some of the results. And it is also, we're talking about adding some layers of information to some of these to maybe provide a little more information, insight, context. So this is sort of hot off the presses. I just got our intern to finish it up today. Medians was not on our top 9 list again, but I think, not surprising to see some of these locations, Indianola, High Street. This area actually has a median. So anyhow, it wasn't on the top 9 list, so it didn't sort of rise to the highest demand. This one is the aesthetic appearance of streetscapes, High Street, Indianola. Again, where people were coming from, but I think this is such a widespread piece. This one was number 7 on the list. I think my takeaway from this would be this is in high demand. A lot of people in different parts of the neighborhood agree that Indianola and High Street could use a little love, right? That's there's support for this. The fact that it's just on the top 9 list alone is enough, right? To sort of say let's have some focus on that. So again, I think this is a place where a raw number would probably also be helpful. And I think maybe then we plug these maps in where they're specifically helpful. And then this is the 17th one, which is school zones. This was number 9 on the top 9 list. And I think this shows us that people understand where the schools are, right? We'll add a school layer to this. But we have concentration around where there's Clinton Elementary, right? We've got a concentration around where Indianola Informal is. I think we've got a Dominion sort of cluster here. That would probably be Watterson, right? Watterson / Whetstone. Well, no, Whetstone would be more through here.
Yeah, Whetstone south of Cook.
Yeah. A little bit, but I mean, that's you get maybe because you're in there and it's sort of in the neighborhood, maybe it's not as much, but I know those streets lack sidewalks. So in any case, I think adding a school layer to this would be helpful. So that's all of them. I think as we've gone through this, I think BJ, I think we need a little bit of time before the beginning of June to really craft a story from what we've learned from this, because I think it raises a few more questions than answers at this point. There are some sort of key takeaways, but I think there'll be some layers. And I don't think I'd want to do all 17 of these. I think we do the top 9 and we'd show these where I think it's showing us something. And we would also show this overlaid with some additional information, and maybe the raw number of how many of the 781 people said something about this, regardless of location, so that we could have that to lean back on. Because the last thing I would want is someone to say, well, no one up here has a problem with sidewalks, then we're not going to bother. Like, that's not the takeaway, right? So I think we need to be just a little thoughtful about that. But this was, Will, the response density in the data. So of the 781 responses where people were sort of concentrated. So there's a pretty good concentration sort of in this zone, Northmore over to Indianola. Kind of some hot spots around Henderson and sort of in the neighborhoods north of Cook, and then sort of south of North Broadway, some yellow, and then a couple highlights up here as well north of Morse. But I think we're seeing, because we're looking at the data the way we're looking at it, I think some of those answers just sort of default to where the density responses were. So,
Right, that looked like almost the same shape for every answer.
yeah, I mean, you can start to see some of these things grow, right? And what we haven't done here is also pulled out the ones that weren't on the top 9 list, right? There's a top 9 where most of the responses, people chose 9 things more frequently than the other 8.
Right.
So there's really no point in highlighting the other 8, not that they wouldn't be in an appendix somewhere, but that's something that we need to think about in terms of storytelling. So these are in no rank order right now. And I think we're going to combine the 2 sidewalk answers potentially, because I think there might have been, if it's related to sidewalks, let's just get it on one map. And we need to we can do things like add the city sidewalk layer where there are sidewalks, so that we can get a sense of how people are maybe answering that question. So there's some additional data layers we can add to these to maybe complete the story. So that's another thing that we chatted about. For this one, Will, we talked about adding where there's signalized crosswalks or intersections, adding a land use layer that maybe shows some commercial concentration, add a CODA bus stops layer to this, so you can see where people are probably trying to cross the street. And I think we might be able to adjust the gradient, Jim, to your point, to have some of these areas where there at least was an answer pop out a little bit more. I think there's an opportunity maybe in some of these cases to follow back up with some field work to get a better sense of some of these. Again, alleys wasn't on the top list, but might be, are there issues in these locations? Are there giant potholes? I know, for example, there is definitely one in this hotspot, so I don't know if that's what they were talking about, but I definitely know the alley adjacent to High Street there is pretty rough. Slow and calm traffic was interesting too. Well, this was number 6 on the list, so this one actually lines up. I think it's possible people might be talking about Milton here. The fact that people might be using Milton as a cut through, that has speed bumps on it. And I don't believe it showed up. It shows up a little bit in terms of sidewalks, so that's interesting. And I know there have been folks in Beachwall asking about sidewalks as well recently, so some of those areas do pop up and a little bit higher concentration. So yeah, you look at these all 18 in a row, and you definitely start to think you're seeing the same thing over and over, but there's little differences.
It'll be interesting to have, instead of have a heat map of responses, which is heavily weighted to where the people that responded live, so they all have the same shape, have a heat map of the DV, like weighted based on where the responses were. So basically a neutral map would just be all solid blue, and then if there are more responses than typical, basically kind of try to weigh the colors by the number of responses from that total number of responses, or number of surveys taken in that area.
Yeah, I think there is a way to do. I think there is a way to do that. Not having Zach wasn't able to join us tonight. His spreadsheet on this, or the spreadsheet of this data, it's immense. It has all of those things, I think, Will, that you're asking for in it. And so it's a matter of doing the right thing. So I think there's some additional work to be done here.
I think it would make some of these really subtle changes pop more.
Yeah, I agree.
Versus there's always a blob down here.
There's always a blob here. There's always a blob there. Yeah.
And that's that's just because that's where the answers came from versus that's showing the differentiation.
Yeah, I think we have that differentiation. It's a good point. So I think we need to do that level of stuff here. You know, and in addition to maybe just Will having raw numbers, you know, out of the 781, is it 300 people that said they wanted better access to the Olympia Trail? Forget where they are, right? Just raw numbers would be helpful. So there's a couple of things that pop up that I think they're looking at that differentiation. I think would be interesting. Will. So I can send this around. This was sort of the primary thing I wanted to chat about tonight. I think there's other layers we can add to it. There's ways that we can work with the data. This is starting to tell us the start of a story, but we had to sort of put this out there to see what the data gave us. And now we need to go back and do a few things, I think, to get the full story constructed. And I know, BJ, there's a lot of people waiting to see the results of all this. But this is the danger of a volunteer-led group, right? So we'll do our best to try and put a bow on this because I know the summer months are coming up and, you know, there's going to be potentially changeover on the committee as we get into August. So I do want to make sure we sort of get a bow on this here in the next, 4 to 6 weeks.
And I also think that as you're dressing it up with the bow and getting it ready for public consumption, I think what's important is not what you say or in the presentation of the material, but I think what's most important is what the commissioners, is what each commissioner surmises from the presentation. Like I did about, hey, I think there's a missed opportunity here to educate and inform the community at large about tree planting and why the city does it. It's not for beautification. It's for ABC, X, Y, Z. So when you see a neighborhood concern about traffic calming, you might be able to suggest and say, hey, that item number 14 that we found in the data could be matched up to item number 6 or whatever item that was in traffic calming. So I think that commissioners need to digest the information and surmise from that, hey, this is an opportunity in my district that blah, blah, blah. So that's what I'm looking mostly forward to. Yeah.
And when I looked at these this afternoon, my first question was, we need to create a response density map, which is why we did this. And so, I wanted to sort of align that up. So we need to now unpack that and do some of the things that Will suggested. And I know Zach will have ideas on how to better parse this information. So we'll get there. This was the first step, and in a lot of ways, the hard work has been done. And the good news is I have two brand new eager interns that just started on Monday. So I can certainly, have someone spend a few more hours doing some of the things that Will suggested. I know Zach will have some thoughts about how best to utilize this. But this was, like I said, we had to put it on paper and see what this was telling us before we understand what we might need to do next to better understand the information. And there's probably some visual noise, visual clutter, data clutter on this that is maybe clouding a story or two. So we'll work with that.
Nicely done.
So it's a start. We're getting there. There's more to be done.
Worth the wait, Andrew. Thank you so much for that. I'm sorry that it's so lightly attended tonight that, there aren't more of us giving you pats on the back.
No need for that whatsoever. I like I said, this raises a few more questions for me or certainly things that I want to explore before we're ready to, truly tell the story of what the survey responses have given us. So we'll get there. I've been texting with Zach here as he's taking care of his daughter. We'll get together here in the next couple of days and and figure out the right way to go. But we have an expert, and it's Zach, and he knows what's going on with the spreadsheet is wild. I don't fully understand it. So he was able, probably 2 weeks ago, we chatted, was able to sort of explain how to, do this part of it. And then I think once we look at these results and see where it tells us we need to go next to better understand some things, we'll be able to do it pretty quickly.
Good.
Hard part was getting it all entered. And then once we got it entered, we can do things with it. So. All right. Well, I might send this around. I will send this around so folks can look at it with probably some caveats and these notes on it. And I'll let you know, in between meetings, even maybe what we've been able to add to this. So we'll keep the conversation going, because I do know that, we need in the next month to start to sort of finalize the work. So.
Okay.
Excellent. We'll work on key takeaways, and I'll send this around if you have any other thoughts, or, hey, let's add this or add that. We probably can accomplish it. So just let me know. Cool.
That's good.
All
Thanks,
right.
Andrew.
All right. Talk to you all soon.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
See you guys.